welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your horsing around host, Madelyn.
I'm your no hooves about it host, Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's show. It's side quest time. It's Emma's turn to choose. What's our topic this week, Emma?
This week, we are talking about horses in games.
Just horses.
And by horse, I do mean encompassing the variety of creatures that are essentially horses.
Emma did shoot down my assertion that motorcycles might be horses.
They can only be horses if they're sentient.
Man, I don't think Cloud would agree with that.
I mean, it doesn't have to be like they talk, but there has to be like some sort of like, bond, right?
Sure.
Like the rider feels as if the bike sometimes has a will of its own. Otherwise, they're not horses, they're cars. I'm sorry.
There we go. The first assertion of the week, the difference between a horse and a car.
Which, in fact, a lot of games mostly have horses in the sense that they are cars. That
yes.
Look like horses.
Hoverboards.
Yeah. No, hoverboard is different. I don't think there are any horses that feel like skateboards or hoverboards.
Whoa, alright, we're getting deep here already.
But there are certainly a lot of horses in games that feel mostly like cars.
Well, Emma, what inspired this pick?
I don't know.
Just feeling horsey?
I've been thinking about, chocobos. Played Rebirth still relatively recently. Listening to all their chocobo OSTs, of which there are many. So, what is a chocobo if not a horse?
Some might say it's a bird.
No, I don't think so. That doesn't sound right to me. And this was after I picked the topic, but there was just recently a state of play that showed the trailer for the next Monster Hunter. And I think they've had mounts for a while, but one of the things they showed in this trailer, it's not a horse, it's like a lizard dog.
Sure.
Or something. But anyway, it can come and scoop you up while you're knocked down on the ground, which looks fun. Not fun enough to get me into Monster Hunter, but seems like a neat little mechanic, Remember
when I thought that Click My Boyfriend was going to love Monster Hunter and he hated it?
Yeah.
Remember when I thought, speaking of horses, that he was going to love The Witcher 3 and he hated it?
He hated it? Really? I don't remember that one.
He was like, it's boring.
Wow.
So I don't have many personal thoughts to share on Roach, an iconic video game horse.
In fact, not one horse.
Not one horse?
He names all of his horses Roach.
What's wrong with him?
I don't know. You have to play the very boring, apparently, Witcher 3 to find out.
There you go. You mentioned when we were preparing for this, Emma and I were not horse girls. Or I certainly was not a horse girl. I don't think that, yeah.
We went horse riding once as a family, I believe.
Yes.
And one of my friends in elementary school was a horse girl, and they had a ranch with horses, so I visited there a few times and rode horses.
That makes it sound like we lived in, Oklahoma.
No, they had a ranch not near here. We had to go for a while to get to their countryside home where there were horses that they rode. I don't think it was even their horses. I don't really know.
Please, tell more. Dive into it.
I'm just giving us our experience with horses. I've probably ridden a horse 5 times-ish, and Mal's probably ridden a horse once or twice.
Yes, that's correct.
I think maybe when we were very small, there were also a horse at a fair that we rode once.
Sure, I don't think that counts.
It sort of counts,
Okay.
So,
still.
Single-digit, probably, horse experiences for me and Madeline here.
Yes. And, not people that were oh my god, I want a horse.
Yeah.
I look forward to Dad on the phone, having listened to this episode, being that's not true.
Maybe we did. Maybe at one point we were really, really wanted horses. I think we were more focused. I was more focused on dogs.
That's true.
What are dogs? But small horses.
No, they're not. As we're going to talk about, horse anatomy is very distinct. And dogs are not, in fact, small horses. And in fact, nothing is really like a horse. And horses, really, by all rights, should not really even be able to walk.
Yeah.
So we'll get there. But the point being that a lot of the writing on video game horses, with the exception of everybody talking about, like, Torrent, right?
Sure.
So much of the stuff on it is like very from the horse girl perspective, which is good. Getting an expert to write on things is good. But it was also a whole window into another world for me.
Yeah.
Even like Simone de Roquefort writes like all of Polygon's articles on horses. What?
Does she still write them? Is she still there at Polygon?
No idea. But in the ones that who knows where anyone writes for anymore.
Yeah.
But in the articles on Polygon that I read about horses, Simone wrote like all of them because she seems to be a horse aficionado and self-professed horse girl.
Yeah.
And it was just like, wow, that's not me.
Yeah.
And no shame or shade to it. It's cool. It's cool when people are into things and they know things about things. That's all great. But it did feel very much like a window to another world this week.
We did have at least one Barbie horse riding game.
We did. That's where I was going with this.
Yeah. But we had a lot of Barbie games.
Those were the games for girls of our age at the time.
I mostly I remember Barbie Team Gymnastics much more distinctly than whichever Barbie horse game we had.
Me too. We very much 100%ed. We platinumed Barbie Team Gymnastics. And I also remember the horse one, and I was so confident when Emma wrote into our little notes document, like, I can't remember which one this is, right? I was so confident I was going to Google it and just be like, oh yeah, let's use my 2 years older experience here to be that obviously it's Barbie Horse Ranch 3 or whatever. And no idea which one.
Yeah.
I remember liking it though.
Yeah. So that's our virtual horse experience.
Yes.
I feel like I actually don't play that many video games where you have a horse, actually.
Well, I think that for you comes down to horses are a staple of the open world fantasy or fantasy-ish game, which is not a game that I feel like is top of your rotation.
Yeah. Because I haven't played like any of the big horse games. You've played Skyrim.
Yes.
You've played a little and certainly seen Clickbait Boyfriend play the Breath of the Wild, right?
Yes.
It's a horse game. Neither of us have played Red Dead. Neither of us have played The Witcher. Neither of us have played Elden Ring.
Clickbait Boyfriend played Elden Ring.
Oh, well, there you go. You've seen Clickbait Boyfriend with Torrent. What are the other big ones? I'm forgetting any.
Metal Gear 5.
Really? There's a horse in Metal Gear 5?
It I didn't do that much reading on this one, but what I did retain is that it like poops on things. Maybe.
I can't imagine Snake riding a horse.
He can. There's like a horse stealth mode. It has a weird name too. It's named D-Horse.
D-Horse?
Yeah.
That sounds like a Metal Gear name to me. So.
Yeah. So yeah, he does have a horse.
Good to know.
No, those are a lot of them. It's important to distinguish, by the way. There are games with horses, right?
Yeah.
Stuff like this. Assassin's Creed has horses.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Ghost of Tsushima.
Right.
Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh, of course. How could I forget Aggro?
The Last of Us. But there are also horse games.
Yeah.
Right? So none of those games come even close to being a horse game, frankly.
Well, I think that a lot of people have retooled Red Dead, specifically Red Dead 2 and Red Dead Online, into a horse game. So that's the one exception there that I'll make.
Sure. But they've had to do that sort of intentionally and partially through mods.
Yeah.
Is my understanding. So none of these games, even games like Red Dead and Red Dead 2 that have, or Breath of the Wild, right, that have multiple horses with multiple personalities or breeds, or have slightly more complex mechanics than just like whistle and now we go fast.
Yeah.
Don't really have in-depth, I would say, engaging with your horse mechanics. Taming system in Breath of the Wild is something like there's often bonding systems that are relatively rudimentary, but in terms of thinking about horse breeding or like really caring for your horse in any sort of like specific way or that sort of thing, there's not particularly in-depth attempts to simulate caring for a horse.
You know, I don't actually know this, but I do bet that Red Dead 2 has an unusually long and detailed animation of brushing the horse.
Oh, I thought you were going to say of the horse using the bathroom.
They do have that.
Yeah.
And if there's a specific motivation AI system for pooping for the horse in Red Dead 2.
I know I say this a lot on the show, but imagine that being your job.
Well, it seems like they really had like a team. Well, they reworked their locomotion system in general, so not just for the horse, but for all of their characters. And then there was also like motivation models for the horse, which are various different things from doing their business to being scared to being hurt to being hungry, that sort of stuff, that affects their personality. So... But Red Dead 2 is so infamous for having like these long, detailed, little mundane animations that I bet there is one like for brushing the horse or doing something with the horse. I'm going to put money on that. I'll put $2 on that.
You're right. I'm sure you're right. I don't mean to say there is an interaction with the horse.
Yeah,
I just mean...
No, I know what you mean. It's not... He's not supposed to just be taking care of his horse. He has criminal things to do.
Exactly.
John... What's his last name? Morgan?
John Morgan.
He's supposed to be stealing stuff. Things.
It's true, but real criminals would have had to take care of their horses.
Yeah. They're just like us.
Yeah.
The first horse girls of the time, bandits.
True. But yeah, shout out to the guy who had to do the horse pooping AI. How relieved was he to have an NDA where he didn't have to explain to people at cocktail parties what he does.
You know, I would have preferred to do the AI system versus, like, the animation setup.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, imagine being... I do this all the time about people in game development now. I promise game developers, I believe that you are probably dateable. But just imagine being on a first date and they're like, oh, wow, like, what's an everyday thing at your job kind of look like? That sounds so interesting.
Again, I also think probably this person... there was not one person in charge of this one AI... model, right?
No, you're wrong.
They did like various things for the horse.
No, I think you're wrong.
Okay. All right.
I did also read an interesting article. You know, they did motion capture for the Red Dead horses.
Of course.
And apparently that sucks to do with horses.
Of course.
Because to motion capture a person, you don't need very much space, and also motion capture equipment is designed for people, so it works on people. And for a horse, you need a ton of space. Horses are sweaty, so the motion capture stuff does not want to stay on. They also move in ways that people don't move, so the sensors don't want to stay on. And also, first of all, the art director was like, this horse was the consummate professional, is what he said in this quote. I think it was with GameSpot, which I just love that. I love describing the horse.
Well, there's film horses, right? So there's horses that just work in movies, and that's what they used, right?
I know, but I just like describing it as a consummate professional.
I don't. Why would you not? If they truly were a consummate professional, you know.
It's true. It just attributes a level of sentience to the horse that I think games don't always portray. So
Okay.
the respect for the horse here.
I thought you were about to make like a really controversial philosophical statement and say that horses don't have sentience. In fact.
No, was not going to say that, but they don't often appear to be very sentient in video games.
Yeah.
But he also told an anecdote where, so they were in this giant space, right? Because you need giant space to do horse motion capture. And because I don't know why they didn't have like a comms system. Like it seems like you should have had walkie-talkies, but what do I know? Got to save on the budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were communicating with each other, the crew, with hand signals. And they accidentally chose a hand signal that was the signal for Blanco, the consummate professional horse, to rear up. And so they kept sort of accidentally, I guess before they figured this out, tossing the rider off the horse. And then they used that in the game's physics engine.
Good.
But good thing the stunt rider was very trained. Because
Yeah.
that could have been very dangerous.
Yeah. I wonder if it was just like the walkie-talkie noise might have upset
Freaked
the
out
horse. Yeah.
Fair enough. Still feels like probably could have been a better system than like, doing the YMCA
Right.
across the room. But what do I know?
That's probably what it was.
Yeah.
It's the YMCA specifically.
People do kind of rear up on their hind legs when they do the YMCA. It's fun to stay at.
Yeah. Stay up on your hind legs.
So I would be remiss if I didn't shout out the main source of online video game horse knowledge, which Emma and I both stumbled upon in our research, which is the Main Quest, which is run by a game designer and horse lover named Alice Rupert, which if you are interested in reading about horses in games in like any capacity from any angle, you should check out the blog, because she writes like about a lot of it in very interesting ways, and it was very illuminating to have someone who actually knows something about horses be like, actually this is not how horses work.
Yeah. Yeah, I stumbled into like horse gamer YouTube at some point. I think from the Polygon video we already talked about. And they talk about the main quest too. So there is like a community. There's the horse gamer community with their own little subgroup where they talk about horse games.
And it does sound like, at first when I was researching, I was like, wow, like there are all these horse games, not games with horses, horse games out there that I've just never heard of.
They don't like them.
They don't like them.
They don't think they're very good.
They think they're awful.
Yeah.
They think they are cash grabs for like 11-year-old, well, not even really for 11-year-old girls, because even the 11-year-old girls will know that they're awful. They're cash grabs for the parents of 11-year-old girls.
Yeah.
She had several articles on the blog of like horse games that I'd like to see, and I was like, dang, some of these would be dope.
Yeah.
Like war unicorns in there. There's just not even really very good like horse sims, honestly, it seems like. But just so many things that you could do with horses that people don't do. But it's also fun to learn other people's, like my media thing. This is not a particularly unique media thing, but it drives me nuts when actors are flailing cups around like there's nothing in them when there should be something in them, and I just can't. It's hard for me to watch a scene where that's happening without going, that's an empty cup, that's an empty cup, that's an empty cup, like constantly. And so it was interesting to sort of see that. It's interesting to find other people's like, Leonardo. This is not how you use the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, right? But like other people's Leonardo DiCaprio, like that ain't right.
Yeah.
Pointing at the screen things, which is, first of all, it's really hard to animate four-legged creatures.
Yes, like in general. Any four-legged creature.
So just because they don't, they talk about this in this Polygon video that we watched for this, that was particularly about horses and how they don't move right. But four-legged creatures are just hard because, with a two-legged person, it's left, right, left, right, left, right. And there's not really any variation in that. And when you have four legs, the order of those legs and the way they operate together and how your weight is balanced is just like way more complicated.
Yes, because they might be different at different speeds too. So you can't just like move the legs faster. You have to change the order in which the legs are hitting the ground, even.
Exactly. And it's extra complicated with horses, one, because they move differently when someone is on them than when someone is not. So you kind of have to do, even just for the different speeds and different types of movement, you kind of have to do 2 separate ones because they are a little different when they're weighed down than when you're not. But horses are super complicated because, like we said earlier, they are freaks of nature. Horses are really heavy, and they have tiny little legs, and they run with such speed and grace, and that is only possible because they have freakishly strong tendons.
Yes.
There's
like
really no
pogo
reason that a
sticks.
horse should be, like, a horse should not be able to run.
And they're on their fingernails.
They're running freakishly fast on their fingernails.
Yeah.
So you just think about that. You think about doing that.
And they don't really have knees in the same way
Yeah.
that a lot of creatures have knees.
But they have to have bend, like, they do have to bend in certain ways, but not too much, because, like, if they are on bent legs, those legs would snap.
Yeah.
So it's just hard.
Yes. Most video game horses can handle steep inclines better than real horses, I think.
Oh, I loved
general rule.
I loved the live action footage of the horse in that video going like Skyrim in real world.
Yeah.
And by going Skyrim, I mean it was on a lightly sloped mountain face.
And struggling.
And really not making very much progress.
Yeah.
But, you know, it also doesn't help. I read a different... I can't emphasize enough. There are hundreds of blogs on the main quest about anything that you could want to know about horses in games. So she had one where she was talking about, like, the most popular asset pack in Unity for horse animation. And she was like, it's just wrong. Like, it's not done well. And they made some changes when she reached out, apparently. But it's just sort of, you know... It is the kind of thing... Many of these things are the kind of thing where if you didn't know anything about horses... you just wouldn't notice it.
Yeah. But there are people who know. I did not... There's a whole... if you want to hear all about Red Dead Redemption 2 horse system, there's like a 50-minute GDC talk from them on it. They don't do very many GDC talks, so they were very proud of this system and the work they did on it, clearly. I did not watch all of it, but one of the top comments was like, it's almost perfect except this one thing in the trot animation. I really hope somebody mods it one day so that it's a perfect, you know? And it's like, it's just wild. People know about horses. They know about horses. I guess there's things, you know, there's all sorts of things like that.
They certainly do. Yes, it does seem like the most common... or one of the most common issues with horse animation, just in terms of physical fidelity, is that moving from a slower speed to a faster speed often doesn't render quite... There's like a weird transition period that isn't handled in a way that it would be with a real horse.
I think this is partly a problem because horses are a pain to animate, right? Of course.
Yep.
But this is also true, I think, for a lot of things in games, due to the fundamental problem of you want it to feel responsive to the player. So even like with, you know, like human running, like the way that a character will often like immediately hit into a run or a jog, right? Which is not really how human bodies would go into a run. But it's because you want the player to be like, okay, my input's going in, it's moving how I want. So you don't really want to, like, unless you're really going for like a realistic portrayal, it doesn't really feel great if it's like there's like a wind up into the run, for both horses and I think human characters. So you sort of end up sort of skipping that, right? You don't really like move into a run. You're just sort of in the run. And, you know, for most stylized things, you might even just, like, really skip it, right? So there's sort of this issue of wanting the game feel versus the actual look of things.
Well, and that comes around to, why are horses in games? What's the point of horses in games. And like 95% of the time, the major point of the horse in the game is you can move faster now.
Yeah.
And so because of that, when the player gets on the horse, like they, in the same way as they don't want to be walking around the city, they want to be running. When they get on the horse, they want to be moving at the horse's maximum speed as soon as they can.
Yeah.
And so because of that, there's no reason to prioritize, like, what does it look like when it moves between a walk and a trot? Because the player doesn't care. The player just wants to go fast.
Yeah. And that's not even like a thing that's been introduced with open world games. Like back when games just had world maps, right, that you run along, even then they were giving you like mounts to ride on to get from place to place faster. You know, like at a certain point in the game, it's like, okay, here's your chocobo in Final Fantasy 2, right? And stuff like that. So there's always been a thing of when you have a big game, eventually you want your player to be able to get from place to place faster as things are ramping up, right, in the story or whatever. So yeah, functionally, they're just traversal vehicles. And if you're in a fantasy setting, they probably don't have cars or motorcycles or skateboards.
Along with that, right, if you're animating a horse, you're designing a horse for your game, really, you have to make a decision about what happens when the player gets on the horse, right? How do the controls work now? I think for most games, that's a generalization, but this is my experience. For most games, you get on the horse, and now you are controlling the horse.
Yes.
Right? Functionally, you have become the horse, and you are doing inputs, and the horse is going to the left when you move the stick left, etc.
Yes.
And then there are a few games scattered here and there, sometimes, where instead we maintain that the player is like the thing on the horse that is directing it. And that can be very hit or miss in terms of how people feel about that.
Yeah. Generally, I think you have to make some allowances in terms of turning, right? You're not turning around as fast on a horse as you would on foot, because that's not how horses work. But in terms of like how well they turn, you know, how much they listen to you when you turn, whether they like flick their head around a little bit before they turn. There's all of that into it. I read there's a whole game developer article, if you don't want to watch the 50-minute talk on Red Dead Redemption 2, that's like examining the system. And like I said, they redid their whole like locomotion system for this game. And one of that was adding, rather than just having forward movement and turning movement, they also added lateral movement, right? Because when a horse is turning around, it's not just like going in a straight line to turn around. It might be moving its feet sideways as well to do like a sharper turn. And the more directionality you have in your animation system, the more blending between the different animations that you need. So that's why they had to set up this whole like automated system that takes into account like the speed, the terrain, the slope, the weather, you know, what the person on the horse is doing, the horse's personality, like how the horse is feeling. It takes into account all of these things and then picks the correct blend for the animations that it's playing, which like, that's already complicated without throwing into all of these different factors into it. Just doing like a normal like, we have a couple of different animations and we have to find the blends in between them. And then you have to take into account all of these other factors and the different animations that might play and making sure that those animations flow smoothly into each other. So just sort of a wild system that they put together for this game.
While we're talking about Red Dead, talk to me about the trail rides that people do. Oh, this is so sweet.
Yeah. Man, when did Red Dead 2 come out and Red Dead Online? Like 2019? 2020?
I think so.
It was like a little before the height of COVID. So something that horse people who have horses or ride horses regularly, were going through during COVID was they couldn't really go and visit their horses. So a lot of them were feeling, lonely. They missed seeing their horses. And so in Red Dead Online, they formed this group called the Rift Trails, which is like 1,700 people or something at the time of this PC Gamer article. It's Meet the Hundreds of Horse Girls Running Red Dead Online's Kindest Posse by Lauren Morton from 2022. So it's like 1,600 of these people, and they run just trail rides where you just like take your horse and go on a nice little ride together, and chat and make fun of the NPCs that have trouble getting past your hundreds of horses, and chat about your different horses and all that sort of stuff. And so they run they ran more than one a day on average in a year. And other people in the group were did photography contests, with mods. Some of them set up obstacle courses to run your horse through. And they just go into Red Dead Online and are we're here to hang out with our horses and our horse friends. It's so delightful, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's always important to remember, when you're thinking about horse girls, right? Having a horse is expensive.
Yeah.
It's an expensive hobby in real life, to put it mildly. And games, I mean, as we've said, there are not very many very good ones that really give you that horse girl experience, but games can be a way to access that for people without literally having to own a horse. Or at times where you can't see your beloved horse.
Yeah. They even add they have their own server where they can make a ranch for themselves, essentially, so they can have their own ranch. They can play as a horse. So they've done all this custom modding to really turn Red Dead Online into their horse game where they can hang out with their horse friends. I just think that's lovely. Honestly.
Yeah. It's wholesome.
Yeah.
Well, let me talk a little bit about some slightly more niche horse games before we talk Elden Ring or Breath of the Wild or that sort of thing. So one of the earliest horse game that I could find or game with a horse, Stampede might be a horse game, is Stampede, which is a 1981 Atari 2600 cattle herding game, which not very many cattle herding games out there now.
Yeah.
Feels like that should be in Red Dead.
I think there is a cattle or sheep herding game coming out soon.
Well,
I can't remember what it's called, but there's some indie that's being made. That's about
Anyway,
herding.
Stampede seems to have been relatively successful despite a glitch where you could get infinite points, as I read about on Wikipedia.
That's just more successful, right?
Yeah. But I couldn't find... I could not figure out the earliest appearance of a horse in a video game. So if anyone is aware of any horses that predate Stampede, let us know after the episode, because I'm curious. Mm-hmm. Another kind of influential game is a game called Howrse, Howrse, which came out, I think, originally in 2005. It's from two kind of French computer science students who there was a French version called Equidiao, which I don't know why the W, what is the W doing in these? I don't know. Did never figure that out, but it stands out. And Howrse is a free to play. It's really silly to say out loud. Browser-based horse breeding simulator. And was one of the first games to bring microtransactions to Western gamers.
Wow.
Which was a little controversial, because the game was very much targeted at teenage girls. In an interview with one of the developers, he said that about 80% of the audience is between 12 and 20 years old, and 90% is female. And of course, that was quite unusual as an intentional target for a game in the year 2005. And yeah, perhaps a little bit icky, controversial to be like, girls, pay for your horses.
Yeah.
But was like super, super successful. I think is still running. They got acquired by Ubisoft in 2011. Yeah. So horses, it's horses' fault that we have microtransactions. There's also Clop from Bennett Foddy, which is like Quap, but with a unicorn.
Good. Is that horse animated correctly?
It depends on what you mean by that. And then also coming soon, the most disturbing game that I looked into for this podcast is Horses, which is a horror game that I think it was in I can't remember what, some kind of state of play type thing last year, where you're like a boy on a horse farm, but they're people wearing horse heads. They're naked people wearing horse heads. They aren't horses. And there's
Delightful.
Yeah, if you go to their website, the first screenshot they show you is a man riding a naked horse person.
Delightful.
Like on its shoulders. So, that's out there. Coming this year, apparently.
A game for the true horse haters.
I guess. Will the horse girls latch on to this?
This just reminded me of there's Pony Island too, which isn't really a horse game.
Yeah. Also want to shout out some horse cameos, right? The Animal Crossing horses.
Right.
Exist. I have to say, I had Bubbles on my island, who, yes, is a hippo, but I always thought of as a horse.
What is a hippo if not a horse?
No. Horse girls would not. They'd be like, the legs are not the same. And then, of course, there are a whole array of Pokemon species,
right,
that are horse-like. I think of Ponyta and Rapidash as being the iconic ones, but I think you ride Mudsdale as like the mount in Pokemon now. There are loads of them. Tons of horse Pokemon, most of which I do not recognize.
There's the sentient motorcycle in Pokemon Violet.
You're right.
So there it is. Your motorcycle horse, Mel.
You're right. I finally found one. How do you ride a Ponyta, do you think?
Oh yeah, their hair's like on fire, right?
It is flame.
Like with safety gear, I guess.
I wonder if this is ever addressed in the anime.
Do they ride? I don't remember them riding a Ponyta.
They probably don't, because I'm sure someone was like, how would you do that? And they were like, I don't know. Let's let them roam free. Speaking of horses that are not horses, I'm sorry to say it, folks. Look, I know everyone is like, oh, Torrent from Elden Ring, like the greatest horse of all time.
Right.
Right? And look, he can double jump, so you've got a firm case for the greatest of all time here. But I hate to say it, but the zoologists of our Elden Ring do not seem to think that Torrent is a horse. And yes, there is several threads specifically about this.
Yes. I mean, it doesn't really look like a horse.
No.
He does have horns, right, for one thing.
But that's okay, right? Like, unicorns are definitely horses. We can accept some horns.
Yeah. He's sort of like shorter and stouter than like a typical horse, at least. And also bends his knees. So that's a big mark, I think. Yeah. But like, I watched that Polygon video where they were talking about Torrent specifically, and how he really doesn't animate like a horse. That's where there's that live action horse on a ledge thing in comparison. And to me, he looks more like a goat, I think. As a non-expert zoologist, but he sort of feels more like a mountain goat that's like big enough to ride.
Folks on Reddit suggested he might be a yak.
That's fair. Yeah.
They suggested he might be inspired by Yakul, who's the sort of antelope type thing, elk thing, from Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind.
Fair.
And then there was a very detailed comment from a zoology university student who hypothesized that Torrent was a cross between a horse and a puku, which I had not heard of before, but is sort of a medium-sized antelope-looking thing with horns like that.
Yeah.
That went into some real detail about what Torrent's evolutionary path might have looked like.
Yeah.
Like what family he could be in, and what that is. It's hard to tell. Is he a horse that grew horns, or is he an antelope that developed non-cloven hooves?
That's fascinating. Does Elden Ring even have normal animals? I don't actually know.
I'm not sure. George R.R. Martin probably knows.
Do you think he came up with Torrent? I read some investigation on, I don't remember what site, but there was one recently that was like, how much of Elden Ring did George R.R. Martin actually do? Which seems to be like he just did a lot of like planning documents, essentially, and then they worked from there. But maybe he came up with this species in those planning documents.
Maybe. He probably read some zoology textbooks and was like, here we go. Here's how we develop Torrent.
Yeah. You'd think it was a zoologist university student up there on Reddit, but it's just George R.R. Martin procrastinating by running multiple aliased Reddit accounts, I think.
Absolutely, for sure. So this is the moment where I admit I feel like I don't use horses in games very often, even when they are offered to me. I find the like management of like where is my horse going to be and how do I get back to my horse sort of difficult. I'm thinking of this in Skyrim in particular. First of all, I just like the challenge of running and jumping up cliffs myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I did so much of that having a horse seemed like a pain. But it just sort of felt like how am I going to keep track of where my horse is?
That is why a lot of games give you like a magic whistle thing.
Yeah.
Right? That calls your horse or mount or whatever to you, as opposed to you having to keep track of it.
But that's the kind of thing that makes it, something that we see semi-successfully sometimes in games, but not as often as the horse is just being a speedy vehicle, is, they want you to bond with your horse. Like, your horse is a companion to you. And that's something that's easier when it's a game that is a little more contained, perhaps. Like, everybody loves the horse in Shadow of the Colossus, right?
Yeah.
Aggro. It's like your one companion, and
you do really need him to get from Colossus to Colossus, too.
You do.
That game.
And there's some very dramatic moments with aggro that happen. And the people put into videos without marking spoilers on it, so what do I know? Shadow of the Colossus is an old game. But it's easier in games like that, where it's like, you absolutely need the horse, and the game is a little more contained, right? But when it's like a big game, it's like, well, what I actually need is something for me to get me from place to place fast. And if that has to be a specific horse, then it either has to be a horse that you can kind of summon out of midair, which is itself kind of like a little bit cheapens having to take care of your companion.
Yeah.
Right? If you really cared about your horse enough that you stashed it somewhere safe and you came back to find it, that would be something that would be powerful for bonding with that set of polygons and pixels. But because that's like annoying AF, and like I won't do it, we have to use this cheat method, which maybe cheapens what it means to take care of your companion who's by your side.
Yeah, it is sort of hard because the point of this horse is because the world is really big and they want you to be able to like fully explore it in a fast sort of manner. That does pose a problem if you then have to leave the horse somewhere to go somewhere on foot and then have to make your way back to the horse wherever you left it. And if it's like a living world too, right? A lot of open worlds, things will be happening even off screen where you can't see them, right? Also, there's the chance that you come back and like something's just killed and eaten your horse, right? That one Eurogamer guy in the video, he's thinking about being able to get his horse eaten and going, hell yeah.
Yeah. I did see a fair number of people online being like, I wish I could skin Torrent for supplies.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
But he can double jump.
I don't know.
Skin can't double jump.
I think you can more or less do that to Shadowmere in Skyrim.
Skin him, you mean?
I think he's immortal.
Ah.
You get Shadowmere for doing the Dark Brotherhood questline, and I did that like right at the very end of the game because I couldn't figure out how to trigger. I did never rest. I'd never go to sleep in Skyrim and just start the. Well, why would you? What's the point? You could stay awake forever. Why wouldn't you? I don't remember what was my character even called in Skyrim anymore. Something stupid.
McBabe, right?
McBabe. Yes, it was McBabe. I was like, I knew it was like more demeaning than sometimes the Mix are, and I couldn't remember what it was. It was McBabe. McBabe the second.
Right. Yeah.
The Honorable McBabe Jr. But I never go to sleep, and so I didn't like trigger the Dark Brotherhood questline until my boyfriend was like, "You have to go to sleep." Which maybe that says something about me in life too, but we won't get into that. So I got Shadowmere at like the very end of the game, and I was not using horses very much anyway, so like I didn't do this. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Shadowmere is like sort of immortal, so people can like they kill it and store items in it.
What? Store items in it? Is this a glitch? That sounds like not a on-purpose feature.
Okay, great. This might be Oblivion, not Skyrim, but
Okay.
As Shadowmere is an essential creature, it's possible to knock her unconscious, then store items on her body as if she were a chest. When she gains consciousness, you can ride her again. This is a useful way to carry items around on a horse without a third-party mod.
Okay. Yes, that's definitely not like an intended feature, I feel like, but just a handy a handy way to do things.
So, there you go. Right. Yeah, she has no encumbrance, so she can carry an infinite amount of items, so if you knock her out, you can just put your stuff inside of her. So, don't think about that too much. Of course, this episode would not be complete without talking about the horses in The Legend of Zelda. All the way back to, of course, Epona, who's the iconic Ocarina of Time and many other games Zelda horse, and then the many horses of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
Yes. I think you can catch up and stable and own up to 3 horses, I believe. So you ride them, and then you have to ride them if you want to keep that horse that you've tamed, right? You can also just tame a horse and then just sort of leave them, and they'll go back to being wild, I assume, for small portions. But if you want to keep a horse, you have to bring it to a stable and register the horse and name it. And then you can swap those horses out at any stable that you go to. And there's some notable. There's the big horse. There's
Giant horse.
The Lord of the Forest, which debatably a horse. Is there like an invisible horse? Am I making that up in my mind? It might be. That might be the Lord of the Forest.
I think this might not be real.
Okay. I think I may be thinking of the Lord of the Forest, like the quest to get that. But yes, there's a few different like colors and kinds of horse. They all have the same skeleton except for the unique ones, I think. So not quite as varied as the 19 different breeds of Red Dead Redemption 2. But some of them are more amenable to being tamed. Some of them are a little harder and you need more stamina. They have some head tracking so that once you've tamed them, they'll follow you around with their head and look at you, which makes them feel a little bit more alive than a lot of video game horses. So some relatively simple tricks can even be enough to make the horses feel a little bit more real in the Zelda games without having to go to the extremes of Rockstar.
They're also still there waiting for you in Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah. Yes, you can transfer your horses over if you so choose.
Games love that now.
Transferring stuff?
Yeah.
I guess so.
I just feel like there's more and more games that I play that have like a little like, oh, you have this save data.
Oh, like, I mean, there's a difference between that and I think like little bonuses you get.
No, but I'm like thinking, like, you know, Mad Dog transferring over in my Fire Emblem.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Like, you know, that kind of like, let's pull a name you used before.
Yeah.
Speaking of giant horses, I also want to shout out, I really liked reading about Hayseed, who was a Polygon Writers giant Belgian horse in Red Dead Redemption 2 online.
Mm-hmm.
Or is this, maybe this is just, I'm sorry, just in Red Dead Online. There's no 2 online.
Yeah.
And Hayseed apparently was very hated.
Yeah.
I want to read this quote from the article. She says, Hayseed, like, big giant horse, kind of slow. She used him as a tank.
Right.
Basically. She says, I asked my friends to comment on this article, and they kept their thoughts brief. Matt simply wrote, Hayseed is not a friend. He is a sin. Jake paused thoughtfully over voice chat before saying, Hayseed is a mistake and a burden. Another friend, Aaron, chimed in with, Hayseed is obviously being fed some sort of performance-enhancing substance, so it's not unreasonable to have both it and its owner exiled to the far reaches of the snowy north. So not all horses are friends.
That's fair.
There is also an NFT horse racing game, by the way.
Of course there is.
Just, you know, throwing that out there. That also exists.
Favorite, mostly pointless, but funny mount. The classic boar drifting from the Nier series. Once you defeat the big boar in the first Nier, you can then ride their sons around, I guess, as you want. And they will drift. They, like, put on, like, really intense speed lines when you're running, even though the map that you can use them on isn't even that big. And you can also, like, really, like, they will, like, plant their hind legs down and, like, drift. Right? You can, I think in Nier Automata, you can just ride them once you get, like, the animal bait or whatever. And you can also do mooses, which I think work the same way.
I know why we don't, because, you know, if you're making a game, there are horse movement asset packs that exist, and there are more examples to use. But I would like to see more unconventional four-legged animal mounts.
Monster Hunter, like I said.
I guess.
Some, like,
but
more
even
canine mounts, I think.
Even just, you mentioned, like, Pegasi are not nearly as common as you would think that they would be.
Yeah. I think you can find a lot of atypical mounts in MMOs.
Sure.
But those aren't as interesting, I guess.
There you go. But you pointed out that, with Pegasi, I feel like Tears of the Kingdom missed an opportunity to have a Pegasus, to me.
That's very true, I think.
I don't know what they were doing
had
over there.
a Pegasus.
There should have been a Pegasus. Heard it here first.
And of course, chocobos. Iconic.
Of course. Cannot forget the chocobo, but more people should be creating chocobos of their own.
Yeah, absolutely.
And more people should be creating games for horse girls.
Absolutely.
All of these games that we're talking about are games for dudes. You know?
Yeah.
Like, these are games for dudes who have a horse. And that's fine. We love a cowboy, but it was so surprising to me that the like I'm caring for a horse genre is out there but terrible or not really out there. And it feels like, in having read so much more about this, that there's a lot of untapped potential.
Considering how much people love farming games,
right?
You'd think they'd be like, yeah, horses, or just like more in-depth animal stuff in general. But no, we just want those crops, apparently.
Yeah, and even the animals in farming games are more or less crops.
Yeah.
Sort of semi-sentient crops. So more horses, more creative horses. I'm ready for it. I'm ready to play them now. Give me Forza Horizon, but with horses.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Do you have any other horse thoughts? There's so much we didn't talk about the like anti-LGBTQ discrimination in an online horse game. I didn't talk about the horse historian who was like, the horses in Assassin's Creed are not really right. There's so many horse things out there. There's so much interesting discussion of video game horses.
I'm ready to stop horsing around now.
You're right. I say nay to more horse discussion. So, listeners, do you have a favorite video game horse or video game horse that we did not talk about here today? Do you think that Torrent is a horse, or even part horse, or is he just a big old goat, like Emma said? Are you better than me at treating your horse like a companion and not just feeling like it's a pain to bring it around and I'll just walk? Do you know which Barbie game we played as children? If you have thoughts on any of this or anything else we talked about this week, hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, and read our blog featuring long-running series Click with Boyfriend and Split Screen. But most importantly, if you enjoy the show, you can subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, new YouTube podcasts.
Yep.
Is that what it's called? I don't even know.
I don't know. It's a podcast list on our channel on YouTube.
There are now 1 million videos on our YouTube channel of podcasts.
Yeah.
So you can listen to them there. TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts. Subscribe to Talk This and go back in the archive. Listen to something else. Next week, I know we're talking about Animal Well, so I got too into it.
And Plants vs. Zombies.
Right. So there's probably horses in Animal Well.
Surely.
Somewhere. I don't think I've seen any yet, but there probably are. And they're probably zombie horses. So, come on back. And then 2 weeks, it's 6 weeks in gaming.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Oh, man. I know that we record these on Sunday at noon, so this is silly of me to say.
Okay. But
will I have finished Trine 5 before this podcast goes to tape?
What a good question.
I'll have approximately 36 hours between when we record on Sundays at noon.
That sounds good.
Fascinating challenge for myself here. Anyway. That's it for this week's show. Emma, do you have a horsey end to this week's podcast?
This week, I hope that your legs can support you in all your endeavors. Horses.